My name is Stephen Richards, and I am currently working as a chaplain in hospice. Prior to that, in terms of my faith journey, I was an atheist for 20 years. I really enjoy the hospice environment because I believe it gives me a great opportunity to lead people spiritually into a place of healing and wholeness, of happiness. I draw from my own experiences in doing that, particularly through my 20 years as an atheist, where I continued to wrestle with questions of faith. And God brought me to a particular point in my life where I needed to take a good look at myself, where I was at. Wasn't happy with where things were going. Realized that prior to becoming an atheist, even though there were lots of things about my beliefs I didn't like, I still felt that it grounded me. And I feel that that's one of the very important things that we need in life, is to have something that grounds us, something that draws us outside of ourselves, outside our own normal thinking processes, and gives us some place to experience ourselves and others in a new way. So trauma is an emotional response to an event in your life that in many ways jars you and keeps you stuck in a particular space. It's something that keeps bringing you back to that point. So PTSD, for example, is when people are brought back to the emotional or even the experience they had when the traumatic event occurred. So trauma is a descriptor of essentially stuckness, being unable to move your life along. In terms of religious trauma, obviously we tend to think of trauma in a big way, and some people in terms of religion have had some very negative, big, unhealthy experiences. Some people have really been through the ringer when it comes to religion. And so we can clearly identify religious abuse on that level. But I tend to look at it on a more subtle level as well. And when we apply that notion of stuckness, I think that religion can often keep people stuck in a particular place in terms of their thinking about themselves, the world, others, and particularly God, because it affects your whole life. And it can really do some very big damage in terms of limiting you, stopping you from really exploring and understanding who you are, stopping you from even doing certain things in your personal life and career. So we're talking big stuff here in terms of trauma, and especially religious trauma. So the German philosopher, theologian Paul Tillich would talk about the ground of our being. And what I like to do is to ground people in a particular notion of God. I make no apologies for the fact that I believe we need to become grounded in God, and I use the 12-step notion of God here. It's God as you understand God to be. I don't have a particular definition of God that you need to orientate yourself to. But the ground of your being when it comes to God is essentially love. It is unconditional love. That is where we really truly see the healthiest versions of ourselves and others, is when we ground ourselves in unconditional love. And that, I believe, is vital for people to do. It's something that I've learned in my own experience, but just bringing my life back to that place of unconditional love allows me to become curious about my life. Why is this here? It's like the Islamic poet Rumi would talk about the guest house. Welcome every emotion into your life. Why? Because they're teachers. They're going to teach you something. And so whatever comes into your life is in some ways connected to God. You can find some connection to love in it. It's going to teach you, it's going to ground you in that environment. So as a leader, the starting point needs to be everyone's got a story. Everyone's carrying a story. I believe that the story that people often carry unwittingly is a story grounded in religious truths that they've been told to accept. I believe that many people in therapy go into therapy for extended periods of time because they're wrestling with stories they don't really realize are there. They're wrestling with religious stories, stories that are grounded in false narratives about who they are. And because they don't realize they keep getting stuck in this pattern. They can't move on. And I think as leaders, when we begin with that notion that people are carrying these stories, then we can start to look for those indicators of that story in what people are saying. For example, a very obvious one came the other day in a visit I was having with somebody where they talked about the feeling that they're being punished. Well, in what way are they being punished? Are they being punished for things they've done wrong? No. They feel they're being punished by still being here. They want to be in heaven, but they're still here. That's a religious story at that point. Is, okay, why are you here? Are you here because you did something wrong, because you need to suffer? Or are you here because you need to do many right things? I mean, you have the opportunity to do many good things. It just reverses that story. I think so. As leaders, it's that question of begin there, identify the story, and then don't impose your own story. And that's one of the hardest things to do when it comes to faith, because boy, do you have a story, and do you have a story that you live by. And it's really important for a leader to hold their story back so that others can bring their story forward. That involves a great degree of trust. And again, it goes back to this unconditional loving thing. It's a great degree of trust that God is the one that's in charge of this work, not us. It's trusting that I don't need to lay out the map before people, that they're going to make their own journey with God in their own way, in their own time. And their form of religion might look very different to yours. But you will hear the language of love. You will hear it. You'll hear it many different ways. When people talk about things they love to do this, they love to hear this, they love to eat this. It's the language of love, and that's the thing that will ultimately connect us and draw us together. So as leaders, you're listening, you're learning to listen for the love language, and you are also speaking love language to others.